For this special version of Autism and How Much It Sucks, this version, as you can see, isn't exactly being done live, but that's only because of the simple fact that, well, I'm used to presenting to only about 15 people, and, well, there's, as far as I can see, there's 200 or maybe even more of you who are here. Frankly, the fact I'm even doing this for Autism Awareness Day is a massive honour, and I thank you all so much for coming for this special day. But yeah, doing this even not live alone is an honour, and I really think it would have been out of the picture to do this live right now. But anyways, with that said, happy Autism Awareness Day, and enjoy yourself with this presentation. Hello, my name is Tom Collier Jr. and I'm a sufferer of the autistic spectrum. For the duration of this presentation, I'll reenact the writing of the autistic diary of how autism sucks, through me talking and showing the animation on the screen. For the best experience, look at the screen exclusively, though with that said, to be perfectly honest, as this is Autism Awareness Day, you probably can't see a lot of other stuff anyway. I also want to point out I will not take any questions until the end of the presentation, because despite this being live, I actually am technically still in the building somewhere. Anyway, I'm sorry for any inconvenience this causes, but yeah, I'm sure it's not much. Kicking this off, I always grew up expecting a bit more from life. My difficulties meant that what a normal person would understand, I would be left in a confusing and difficult position. I lived life hoping that there was a point in the shenanigans, but life with autism, how could I describe it? Every time I tried to understand a normal situation, it would end up terrible. There are lots and lots of examples of this later in the presentation, don't you worry. There was a time in old-fashioned British law when people used to actually say the metaphor, "It's raining cats and dogs." I never used to understand metaphors back in the day, so I was actually expecting actual animals falling out of the sky like in an apocalypse. So I ran for cover and cowered like a freaking puppy whenever I heard stuff like this. I don't get embarrassed, but I bet my parents were. Everyone calls me a modest, likeable guy whose positive attitude and kind heart helped in many a dire situation. Physically, my life's rather easygoing. I don't do too much forceful work, and when I do, it's baby work for baby people. Emotionally, however, my life is hardcore. Every time somebody makes an ironic joke that I don't get, well... A few years ago another day, I was just leaving a place in McDonald's outlet. I asked Auntie Sue to make sure I wasn't being left behind, with her replying, "We'd never leave you behind," and my mum joked, "I would." Now, since I never used to not take anything literally, it was an insult to all the care that I put into my mum, and I thought, after all that, this is what I get? The argument lasted for a good while, and I threatened that I wanted to be with a different mum that respects my differences. Eventually, it took long enough, but we shut up. If you think your life is bad, remember me. You'll feel lucky, trust me. Generally, I obey orders and don't do anything rebellious. The only times I do so, I ask why I have to do it and comment on flaws with the idea or something similar. Why do I have to be so different? You'd think being different would make life interesting. In the worst ways possible, maybe. My life isn't much more than an internal struggle to please everyone, including myself. For my entire life, ever since my birth, I have always been bombarded with compliments. I even won a baby cuteness contest in first place. I usually take these things nice, but there was a time where I started to get repetitive compliments about my height. I'm probably one of the taller people I know. The first few times I found it alright, but everyone I knew made the same compliment over and over again, and it really got annoying. I also don't understand the big hoo-ha about tall people. Small things are supposed to be cute. There once was a time back when I was much littler when I used to actually be quite curious. I would often ask questions about certain things that I overheard. However, every time I did get involved in that way, everyone said the hurtful word, nothing. Nowadays I'm trying to resist this curiosity, but it was quite difficult back in the day. What's especially hurtful about the word nothing is that I didn't hear it just once. When I was little, I used to ask a lot of things and heard it repetitively. It's like a cycle of emotional pain. Another thing, which at least I think is to do with being autistic, is my choice when it comes to the five senses. I don't know about you, but I know only very few people among me who absolutely despises perfume. I really don't know why, but it's just not right. I honestly prefer the smell of anything else. At high school, many ages ago, they kicked me out of the SCD Hub's green room and I'm no longer allowed in there because apparently it's kind to kick people out because they're too old for a so-called younger room. I can't see any reason why that was fair at all though. If I go to a building every day and I have the choice, I tend to set up a room so it's like a base of actions for me. A shelter, if you may. As an autistic person, I generally can't have change altogether. This, plus the fact that I tend to get attached to my new base, means that although it seems already sad enough that they kicked me out in the first place, I'm actually a lot sadder or angrier than I actually look. Some of my old bases in my school life include, but might not be limited to, my homes, obviously. I always felt welcome in these two places, mainly because the only people who live at my two homes have known me for at least a while, plus Father's home in particular is very cosy, it's unbelievable. That shed, isolated at the back of primary school. The only inaccuracy in the picture is that you can't take drinks outside in real life. The shed was a sturdy building to hide aside, kept me out of sight from bullies, and even provided protection from the cold and winds. It was the only salvation in the primary school where they shove you onto an unforgiving playground. More on that later. My own mind. It's fair enough to say that I feel more welcome in my own mind than any real place I've ever been to in real life. Here, I'm free to think of whatever I want, from visualizing my massive video game success, to visiting an imaginary girlfriend, to revisiting funny media. There's a lot to do here. The green room. Unlike most of high school SCD Hub's other rooms, this place had an average temperature and was cosy. Also, because it was indoors, it kept me safe from outdoor bullies. Because of the way the room looked, it was a happy room, if you may. Best of all, the entire place was coloured green, my new favourite colour. Another thing about autism is that normals are really vague and also seem to make insignificant things seem very valuable. For instance, I was just getting changed and Mum knew I forgot my deodorant. How? I don't know, but what I do know is that her tone of voice made it seem as if she hated people over their smells, which is ironic considering the fact that when I smelled myself, I didn't notice any different at all. Look, I know that smell doesn't really beat personality, but her tone of voice made it seem like it did. I've always wanted to be mute, and this is for several reasons, but I'll only mention the worst and strongest reason. You see, normals have the natural tendency to constantly interrupt other sentences. Other normals don't mind this, but I'm not normal. I'm sitting here trying to talk to the normals, and here I am forced to use electrical presentations to get my point across due to the fact that you normals just cannot stop and let me speak. Seriously now, why do you need to watch or read and not listen? I blame technology. Computers are great for video games, homework, etc., but why socialization? Why is it that normals need some machine to talk to other normals, and I feel like I'm the only one who can just go up to the recipient and talk like a man? How do you call yourselves socialites when you obviously cannot approach someone personally? Anyway, now we get to the part where the original Swearfield's Diary got to the part where it's finally being done by the semi-modern 17-year-old version of me. Naturally, growing up has shown me more serious issues about my differences, leaving more reasons to rage and cry, so I shall not delay. I suppose it's slightly disappointing that when I ask for help, I usually hear more of what I already know versus what I actually need to hear. That's probably not to do with autism and more like my patience more than anything. I know I'm going off topic, but have you ever had the odd feeling that a majority of your community believes in a fact that you either believe to be false or you wouldn't understand why it would be considered factual? I've had that feeling far too often myself. It almost seems like I'm the only one who understands the truth. For instance, have you ever heard of the 5-a-day theory? It's a simple, healthy living theory that the average human needs 5 dosings of different fruits and or vegetables per day. Sounds simple, right? So why have we come to this in an autism presentation, you ask? Well, I was once forced to have a particularly drab dinner containing mashed potatoes of all things. Mum said it was to do with the 5-a-day theory that I mentioned before. However, do you really notice the effect? Seriously? I'll admit, I'm not very slim to be honest, but I'm not exactly overweight material either. Yet Mum heavily implies that apparently, since I don't have the 5-a-day hoax, I'm automatically the most unhealthy person in the history of the universe. Look, I know I exaggerated my wording a lot, but I mean, does she really think my health's in any kind of danger? I went to swimming sessions countless times. I run around Father's garden more than frequently, and I have a decent, almost snack-free diet, and this is the treatment that I get? I already told her multiple times how much I hate those potatoes. But as usual, no one listens to me. Story of my life. If I don't write down my complaints in a document, nobody cares. But once it's in a book or a presentation or something, I suddenly have all of the importance in the world. Lesson number 1. Meat has purpose too. Don't just assume that a cereal bar is enough to get you through an entire 24 hours. Humans need protein as well, not just vitamins. Anyway, so now that I'm 18 years old, I figured that it's probably now that I'm allowed to review the schools I've been to in my life. So let's talk about primary school. As I've said before, this here is the worst school to possibly go to if you're autistic. Or at least at the time I remember being there, which was what, 2001? 2003 maybe? Where do I even start with that live nightmare? One of the things I remember most is how they settled break time, or playtime as I think it was called back then. How it works is despite the fact that I'm autistic and that they're fully aware of that fact, they don't bother asking me what experience works for me, let alone actually change anything accordingly. So, as people with common sense will guess, they forced me onto the playground whether I liked it or not. Now, this would have been fine if the playground actually lived up to its name, but it didn't. I fell into a massive beginner's bully trap. Yep, before I even have any certainty that I have a separate identity, I'm thrust into the heart of war. And the bully deterrence system, I must say, is hideously unfair. How it works is that I cannot make a bully face their punishment without telling a teacher. The effect is not instant, and the teacher expects me to wait and ignore those fools until they can get back to me. Easily giving up bullies may have been fine with this, but the enemies I had to deal with never gave up. Meaning, obviously, I had no choice but to run and hide where available. Luckily for me, there was a shed nearby that had incredibly awful windows and solid walls that hid me from everyone on the other side. I think they used that for playthings back in the day. So, in essence, I was never able to spend a playtime running around the area. Rather, I had to sit and hide behind the shed every single day. It wasn't so much a playground out there and more like a battlefield, and there wasn't any other way to escape the madness since the shed was constantly locked. Always behind the shelter. That is until I became what I think was called a Year 6. Not only an academic promotion, but also a status symbol in my mind. I was weirder then than I am now, I know. But regardless, for some strange reason, no bullies ever pestered me ever again in my last school year. Regardless, I've always considered the shed my hideout and still hung out there even as a Year 6. So, that's a lot of things wrong with the school. They don't do anything to help you with your autism. They force you onto the playground when you ask them politely. Their bully deterrent system is broken and outdated even at the time, which was 2001 maybe, and they don't provide any facilities just in case you start to begin fearing the outside world. Speaking of which, guess which 18-year-old teen just found out yet another thing he hates about society? Me, of course! For some strange reason, there was a form I had to fill in that required me to fill in my national insurance number. Why this is the case is beyond my reckoning, but what really drives me up the wall is how to find out what my national insurance number was. A major society flaw is that I have no clue what my national insurance number is from my birth until quite recently. Why? Simply because nobody could be asked to ensure I have necessary information. Oh, and don't worry, because like usual with all autistic people's lives, it only gets even worse. The only way to find out your national insurance number is to call up a governmental service. I'm certain that sounds pretty okay to you able speakers in the audience, doesn't it? It isn't at all, trust me. Rather, the majority of the conversation had to be done by my sweet, cuddly mum because the receiver spoke confusingly and incredibly quietly. Put it this way, I usually expect normal people to speak somewhat quieter than how I'm speaking right now. I do find that bizarre, but I'll get to that another time. Anyway, these phone people were essentially speaking at the volume of a large insect breathing. That's the level of speech volume they were achieving. Which of course is unacceptable. What if I needed to call them again when I'm vastly older and even less able to hear? I wouldn't even dream of having the foggiest of what is going on. Eventually, they learned their lesson for when they needed me and spoke up. But it still sounded quieter compared to what I was comfortable with. Maybe I'm hard of hearing. Maybe my mum's house phone is the worst house phone in existence. But neither of these are my fault, and it isn't much of a tall order to just speak up. Plus, it's not like it's that hard to increase your speaking confidence. Personally, I think that any job where you talk to people should make you have a degree in confident speech. The only way to obtain said degree would be to be successfully taught and able to speak how I am right now. This would essentially make it so that phone call receivers are forced to make themselves heard correctly. Have you ever done something wrong and people ever gave you a lack of input, so you had no clue whether to feel horrible or not? Of course not. You're all normal. You always know what to feel at what time because you're used to how vague everyone is around you. I just have no words other than the following. On December the 15th of 2014, I, obviously, managed to break the hinge off of our shower once. Problem was, I was blinded by annoyance because the hinge was already poorly implemented at the time before I made it worse. It would either settle the shower head too high or too low. I can't really cope with that. Anyway, when I broke it, Mum arrived, pressuring me to put on a towel to cover up my you-know-what, before she went in and said a bunch of stuff I forgot about. I lost count how many times I said sorry, trying to explain what happened, but to no reply. This might have been alright if I knew that showers with stoppable heads were cheap, but I didn't. Also, Mum's voice had literally no emphasis other than annoyed but not really, and didn't make it obvious whether I should feel horrible for it or whether to shrug it off as okay. How am I supposed to know what to feel if it's not made fairly obvious? Because then, I just assumed, knowing our luck, that similar showers were disgustingly expensive as an excuse to feel absolutely horrid. It took long enough before Mum finally made things more obvious by trying to cheer me up. Not that it worked or anything. I would have preferred the cheer-up attempts earlier when I felt the most horrible. You know, it was very difficult to write this script without the use of inappropriate words due to my massive frustration with not knowing what to feel. Oh, and you'll never guess what. I found yet another thing that I couldn't dream of understanding. And this time, I'm not sure whether even a normal person could understand the following. In order to prove my independence, I get the bus to college every Wednesday and Thursday. I have to pay £2.50 of Mum's money to get on the Wednesday bus. Also, once upon a time, I used to have a bus pass to let me get on the Thursday bus for free. I mean, as lame as it was waiting for the buses to arrive, at least it's nice knowing that your parents only pay for one day for the entire week. The bus companies I normally go with are Stagecoach and Centrebus, because no other bus company really has a business presence here in Barton-le-Clay. I mean, you see the odd minibus every so often, but that's it. So naturally, when I get my new bus pass, it only makes sense that the selfish bus companies make my new bus pass Arriva only. I am not kidding. Arriva only bus pass in Barton-le-Clay. Now I would have understood it if this was Stagecoach only, since I can easily see a bus company taking advantage of its customers by making them rush to the stops. After all, you can't really trust a company. But this makes no sense, since Arriva literally has no business in Barton-le-Clay at all. I mean, at most, one Arriva bus arrives in Barton because the driver is lost and the backup can't be asked to help. That's it. I genuinely have no further comments because this is ridiculous. I'm not even sure how Arriva makes money from any of this. It's because of my lack of a decent pass that I give more money to Stagecoach and Centrebus. Therefore, they're the ones better off. This isn't fair because I didn't ask for this. I probably should stop complaining though. After all, my parents are technically still paying for me. On a bright note, I found out that Centrebus only charges £2.10 for a single trip to Warden Hill versus Stagecoach's £2.50. And that's about it for now. Thank you so much for listening. Now you are free to ask questions. Despite this not being done live, I should be around here somewhere.